Hello again, folks. Steve here again. I just thought I'd weigh in on the minimum wage thing here because there's been a bit of a talk about it. I don't know a whole lot about it really, except the concept basically, and I try to stay more with principles than with details because when you get down in nitty-gritty details, you can lose sight of the principle of things that are going on. So I prefer to stay up at the principled side of things. Now, I've been noticing on Facebook that people have been, every time something happens, people like to virtue signal. Like if there's a terrorist attack in France or whatever, well, people will put like a French flag over their face and we support France and so on, without any really addressing what's really going on a principled basis or what's on a deeper level. And I see this showing up on Facebook in these places, these little memes about, don't be mean to Tim Hortons workers, and a picture of a girl in Denmark. Hi, I work at McDonald's and I get paid $20 US, and here's my wristband that shows that I work at McDonald's and so on, and therefore, yay, socialism in Denmark. There's government guns that will force McDonald's to pay you $20 an hour. Meanwhile, costs got to show up somewhere else. So I thought I'd weigh in on this because, first of all, if you think that I have a hardened heart here, it's not that. I get it that people want resources. I mean, this is human life. This is the nature of life in general. I mean, we come onto this earth as human beings, and we got to eat so that we can screw. If it comes right down to it, and then everything builds from there. We're going to have to eat so that we can reproduce. That's every creature has to be able to do that. And it just so happens that our methodology, our train of getting our resources for most people is through some sort of currency we got to have. Like I remember watching this migrant coming into Europe, this guy from Africa, whatever, and I feel for the guy. I feel for the guy, empathy for him. He's in a state of rage. I want money, right? Of course he wants money. That's why he's there, right? Because he comes from this wretched hellhole, wherever he's coming from, and he's hoping for a better life. And his idea of better life is more money. Well, most people are like that. So when you say to most people, hey, I am Mrs. Government here, I am Kathleen Wynne, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to announce, because we've decided, that's our little cabal here, we're going to decide to impose a certain amount of money that has to be given to you by your employer, by the powers vested in us, which is basically guns. Because we're going to do this, and, to hell with you, and everybody goes, yay, isn't that such a progressive individual, right? And I think it's absolutely hilarious in a way, because I see this as a reaction to Trump. Of course, she's going to deny it and say it's a reaction to Alberta, what happened in Alberta. But of course, in the US, this evil monster Trump reduces taxes, so it allows companies to raise wages to $15 minimum in some cases. So right after, of course, Wynne, who just hates, of course, I don't even have to read it. Of course she's going to hate Trump. Of course she's going to hate Trump, right? And so she doesn't want to be left behind by Michigan or whatever. So she raises it by the force of a gun rather than by just allowing people to keep more of their money, and therefore they want more productivity. It's a competitive work market. So if you're in a competitive work market, you actually have to provide incentive for the best people to come and work for you, right? But the problem is, by top-down enforcement of these sorts of things, is that it has to come from somewhere else. And the thing with it, well, in other words, the cost, because if you have a business that's chugging along at an equilibrium, approximately, which many businesses at most of their lifetime are, and I've run a business, so I know this. Like you have to balance out your costs and your expenses and your income constantly. And if you get to that point of equilibrium, that's where you want to at least be. You don't want to be in the losing side of things, right? You have to at least be in that equilibrium. Now, if something comes along and a bunch of stuff gets imposed on you, like a dramatic imposition of, say, several dollars per hour, you have to pay your wages more because you happen to be in a model where it's entry-level workers. Well, for entry-level workers, then you're going to be paying them as little as you can, because you're getting people who have they've just spent 15 14 years or whatever in government schools. Well, they spent 13 years in government schools and 4 years in a university and have absolutely no skills. So you can't pay them anything because they don't know how to do anything. They know how to get tattoos and so on, and nose rings. But they don't know how to do anything. So you can't pay them. You have to pay them the minimum. And you get this imposition of several dollars an hour wage increase. Well, to stay solvent for the first time, you got to look at, okay, what else can we do? So Tim Hortons has to cut some benefits in order to stay solvent for the time being. And of course, Kathleen Wynne, after just making a draconian imposition of imposing a tax on those businesses, which is what minimum wage is on a business, she goes on the attack. For somebody who's never run a thing in her life, I'm sure, goes on the attack of Tim Hortons and saying, you know what, you should have come after me rather than after your employees. Sorry, Kathleen Wynne, the employees don't have guns. You have guns, missus, and that's who you're going to come after me. I don't have a choice. If I'm McDonald's running in Ontario or Tim Hortons running in Ontario, I don't have a choice whether or not to pay my employees $15 an hour, because there's just been an edict from on high, from the gods above, that says you have to pay this. So if in order to stay solvent, I have to either start jacking up wages or jacking up the costs of things, cutting this, cutting that, and they shuffle around a little bit of things to make it work. But in the end, nobody's better off, because you know what? Minimum wages have been going up and up and up and up and up ever since I can remember. When I first started working, I think minimum wage is about $3 an hour, and now it's at 15 or whatever. Do I really see the working poor any better off? I don't. In fact, when we were still on a bit of a metal standard, back in the day, a Canadian coin, or I think it was a U.S. coin or Canadian coin, quarter, was worth about, well, when money was based on silver, say, or it was pegged to either gold or silver, if you flash that forward to today, minimum wages would be maybe $25 an hour. So who's to fault? Why is there this constant having to increase wages? Why is there an increase in wage required at all? Well, it's because of inflation, mostly. Because of inflation and because of higher costs due to government manipulation and imposition of all kinds of strange rules on business. And inflation, of course, people think that's just things are getting more expensive. Well, it's not that things are getting more expensive. What's happening is that the value of the currency is constantly being diluted by government borrowing, government printing, and government, there's borrowing, there's printing, and there's also debt. Debt is probably the biggest one put forward by banks and so on. If you go out and get a mortgage, you put $10,000 down, you get $100,000 as a loan. That got created out of nowhere. That's just a credit on the ledger that's given, and that gets added to the whole pot. So this constant growth of what's called fiat currency just keeps on adding and adding and adding. So the number of dollars in the total number of ledgers now versus 20 years ago is much more. And therefore, whenever you have a pot of individual items that are considered currency, and you add a whole bunch more, but they're to represent the same value in that pot, then each one of them is valued less. So in order to have the same value of $3 an hour when I was a kid, now you need $12 an hour or whatever. But it's because of government. So when people, what I want to say here is, people a lot of times, and it's well intended, but we know where the road to hell is sometimes paved with, right? Paved with lots of good intentions. People's intentions are great. You know, when I see people put stuff up on Facebook that they're pasting the French flag, or they're posting this girl over in Denmark, she's getting paid $20 an hour, shame on you, USA, and so on. Well, I understand the good intent, just like I understand the genuineness of this man saying that he wants money. But we're pointing our finger at the wrong place. Because why is it like that? Why isn't $3 an hour still sufficient? Why doesn't, it was then, or it was barely then, but it's not nearly now. Nobody could live on that. So why do we need 15? It's because of this constant jiggery of the currency, which is backed by nothing empirically. So it's constantly being dissolved and washed away, just like some salt in a cup that we keep on adding water to and overflowing. It's becoming less and less and less and less concentrated. So we got to have more and more of it in order for it to be effective. So there's the biggest problem, I think, are these three things. This borrowing of foreign and otherwise debt, this printing of currency, bailouts and so on, and this debt financing, and also, of course, taxation. That's also, taxation actually draws down the value of people's money. So it's, even people who are making that very, very minimum wage, they're paying more taxes now than they would have been back when they were paying $3 an hour in terms of a percentage. They get, employee withholding taxes. They get CPP put on that. In some cases, they get union dues taken off of that mandatorily. And that all reduces because the $15 an hour is just the actual number, but it's not actually what they receive. Sure, they might get something back at the end of the year, but they got to wait all that time for that. In the meantime, they got rent to pay and so on. Whose fault is that? I don't see the mass outcry at the real culprit, right? And I think the reason for that is somehow a lot of people confound government with them. They say this is our government. No, it's not. It's a hostile parasite that's living as a super god above us, who's dictating our lives. That's how I see it anyways. And that's the real culprit. The truth is, the real minimum wage is zero, right? That's the minimum that can be paid. The truth is that everybody, if there is freedom, should be left up to their own, ideally, if they were left up to their own, if people were educated enough to be able to negotiate. If we learn negotiation skills, and almost nobody learns that, and they understand their value, and they create skill, develop talents into skills, then of course society would be better off for that, and they would be in demand, and they'd be in demand according to their skill level and what they could bring to the market, because every employer, of course, hires in the same way that they buy commodities. A lot of people get nervous of this. They think, oh, this is dehumanizing and so on, but it's not dehumanizing when we understand value, right? Because people at the end of the day don't care about us. When people go into a Tim Hortons, most people are not paying the employees. They don't think of that. They're thinking of getting their coffee and their donut, right? And the employer sees it as that as well. So he's got to look at, okay, what can I sell and what can I afford to pay, right? So if some government comes along and says, oh, you got to pay those people more, well, he has no choice but to adjust things, to basically either cut costs on the benefit side, raise the wages, fiddle around with maybe not doing some maintenance, maybe not planting some more shrubbery next year. It all has to be looked at. And at the end of the day, it's going to get passed along somewhere. And the end result is the working poor are never going to be better off under this, because history has never proven it to be better. Because what's going to happen is it's $15 an hour. Several years later, it's going to be the pushes on for $20 an hour. But that $20 is going to be worth no more than what the 15 is today. So the big problem is, why is this degrading? And why it's degrading is because of constant government manipulation. And until this changes, there's going to be no end to the constant cry for higher minimum wages. They've never worked, and they never will work from this model. It's better to let the agreement take place, let prosperity take place, and wages will naturally rise on their own, because there'll be a demand for workers. When you stifle the economy, people go somewhere else in the world. It's very mobile now. They go somewhere else, and all the good talent goes, and what you have is a bunch of windbags like Kathleen Wynne, good name by the way, who think that they somehow understand business enough to just say, okay, you guys got to pay everybody more now because they're not getting paid enough. Good luck, Kathleen Wynne, and you are chasing employers. You're chasing the intelligentsia, the intelligent people out of Ontario to somewhere else. And I said it before, what's going to happen is it's not people coming to Canada because of Trump. It's going to be people from Canada going to the States, because that's where the opportunity is. Because they understand something. Trump understands, a businessman running an organization like that understands that when you cut the cost of business, you increase the profitability, and that's passed along to the employees. All the best. Take care for now.